Good afternoon and welcome to my flight, the International Dawn to Dusk competition. If you're watching this, it's probably because you either know me or you're a family member or somebody that knows me from flying. So thanks for taking the time to come and see me do this flight. It's going to be new for me, broadcasting and doing this at the same time. So the objective here is to show you how we would do this flight in reality and what this competition is all about. Okay, so this video is going to be recorded in segments, in legs, so you I don't think you will be 4 hours here with me, but if you do, welcome, and if you don't, then you can see it later. So the first thing is, what is this competition about? Basically, the Dawn to Dusk challenge is sponsored by Poolies, and it's about encouraging the most interesting employment of a flying machine within the limits of competent airmanship. And it's between the hours of dawn to dusk, that's the title of the flight, and it's undertaken in original and praiseworthy objectives. So the flight must also be a minimum of 4 hours airborne between the hours of dawn and dusk, and can be anywhere in the world. Okay. So some of the criteria are about the planning, the flying, the safety, the log of the flight, which we will go into some detail about that. And the reason I chose flying in the Azores is because I believe there are 9 hidden treasures, and the flight is intended to go from one island to another island and crossing all the islands and showing you the beauty of these islands as we are airborne. So unfortunately, because we can't do that in a real aircraft, at least not yet, we'll be doing that virtually today. Okay, so I'll take you through some of the things that I've planned for today, some of the weather briefing, the flight plan, the log, and all of that, and then we'll get on the plane and we will get going. Okay. But just before we do that, I want to show you a little video about the inspiration and about the Azores, which is what we're about to overfly. I hope you enjoy the video. Right, so I hope you enjoyed the video, and next thing is to show you what we'll be doing today as a flight. So the idea is to fly from Santa Maria, which is the most eastern island in the Azores archipelago, and then fly to every island. So we're going to go to São Miguel and then to Terceira, Graciosa, São Jorge, Pico, Faial, Flores and Corvo. On the way up north to São Miguel, we're going to do a little bit of a detour to the most eastern point of Nordeste. Weather permitting, we'll be able to see something. Otherwise, that is the plan we have for today. Okay, so this is a flight that has some risk and needs a lot of planning. So I'm just going to take you through what the plan is. and then we're going to go to the aircraft, do the pre-flight, and eventually get airborne. So as a pre-flight briefing, this is not your average VFR flight on a Sunday afternoon. So, and gone to a lot of effort to prepare this flight. It's also part of the competition to be as thorough and as accurate as you can in terms of what you're doing. So the pre-flight briefing basically consists on the weather, and if you would go to the Portuguese Meteorological Institute, you would get the charts for the winds aloft and temperature. I took for two flight levels, flight level 50 and flight level 100 at 12 Zulu time and 18 Zulu time. You can see on the right, on the red rectangle, where the Azores are. So we can expect mostly southwesterly wind, anything between 10 and 15 knots. And this is to show that actually the Azores now are having the high pressure to the north, and as well you have a hot front over the north of the Azores, which is going to complicate the weather, as you will see. This is something that we usually get out of for our weather briefing. It's not really relevant because we're not going to be flying anywhere near flight level 380, but just goes to show there's if you would fly at flight level 380, you get 100 knots on the wind stream. So that's the picture on the weather. You would also have a look at whatever's going on in terms of meteorological reports and terminal area forecasts. Going through this, you can see that Santa Maria right now is IFR. That's okay because we're going to depart in IFR anyway. And with regards to Corvo, you will also see that the weather's not looking so good. Okay. Now these days pilots have a lot of resources to see how they plan their flight, and one of the things we're going to have a look is windy. And windy is showing right now in Santa Maria that there's low base cloud with a QNH of 1028 and winds from the south. So we'll be taking off to the south in any case. And since we'll be flying IFR, we will be doing the IFR departure, which will be this one here, which is Victor Mike Golf 3 Sierra. We're going to take a right turn to track 008 and then intercept radial 340 to Sao Miguel. Actually, we're going to deviate from that. We're going to go to northeast, and then we're going to go straight west to Ponta Delgada. Now back here in our briefing and windy, we can also see that in Flores the weather is also not so good. The wind's calm, visibility is very low, light rain, drizzle, mist, clouds broken 300. So it's not looking very good to go in that direction. So just to be clear, under normal circumstances you wouldn't do this flight because it's not looking very good. However, we will be doing it, and I will show you the means to divert if required. Now coming back to our briefing, let's go here to our pre-flight briefing, and let's just skip these as we've already seen these. So another thing we usually do is we look at NOTAMs. NOTAMs are notice to airmen, and they give you information about any restrictions or anything that is useful about the flight. I've already read these through, and most of them are about COVID-19, the fear, some restrictions, and also some other minor things which are not really going to affect our flight. So we've been through the NOTAMs. And in terms of weight and balance, because we're going to be taking off on a full fuel load, we're going to be taking about 200 liters of fuel. I expect on the normal flight it would be myself and somebody else, so give or take 80 kilograms on the left-hand seat and another 85 to 90 kilograms on the right-hand seat. We're going to be doing 4 hours airborne, so and flying over water, so expect to take some food, some supplies, a dinghy, some life jackets and stuff like that, so add another 20 kilograms. And this is kind of where our CG would be. Obviously this is a fictitious CG. The CG, the moment arm of a real aircraft, you would then put that together and get your weight and balance, but this is a representative. In terms of performance, we'll be taking off from Santa Maria. This is the METAR at 10 Zulu time. If we should, as expected, wind from the southwest slightly, so within the limits. This is all because it's a 10,000 foot runway. We're not too concerned about performance. We're more concerned about crosswind and if it's within the limits. After takeoff, we'll be doing VY about 74 knots, and then we'll be doing that standard instrument departure to the west and then to the north. In terms of performance, we'll aim to cruise at about 10,000 feet, average 20 knots headwind, and that should do about 360 nautical miles. We expect this to give us just over 4 hours, and we have fuel on board about 6 hours 30, which should be enough to the alternate, which is Flores, and in any case, if we need to go to Horta, we can still make it. That's the planning of the fuel. To Corvo, well, as you already know, it's very much IFR there, and the closest METAR you have is from Flores. Winds relatively calm, but 3,000 meters visibility, light drizzle, rain, cloud 600 feet, which is not what you want for this kind of flight. But anyway, that's what we have. So as I said, we wouldn't take off on this weather knowing that the destination is like this, but we've made our assessment of the threat, and we'll either go to Flores or to Horta if that is the case. Now the pilot log, we will be recording all the different estimated times and actual times just to check if we're on schedule. We'll be doing this, where is it? We'll be doing this here in a little Excel, and then we'll be putting down all the different things, and this is going to be part of the flight log that would be submitted to the actual competition. Coming back to the pre-flight, I'm sorry we're going to go through this again, but proper planning prevents poor performance, as the English say. So we're going to go and see what else we have. By the way, on any normal flight we do this anyway, to a greater or lesser extent. But over here we're obviously putting a lot of effort into this. So that's the description of the legs we'll be doing. So first leg straight up north, more or less, to Nordeste, and then overflying the entire island of São Miguel, and then off to Terceira. From Terceira we'll be going to Graciosa, and then going southwest to São Jorge, and then to Pico, and then to Faial, and then the biggest leg is going to be ahead of us from Faial to Flores, and then to our destination, Corvo. So the flight plan, you would normally go online on the Portuguese nav website. This is my login, and you would put in all the details and all that stuff to get a controlled flight. Because we're simulating this, I'm just going to show you how that flight plan would look like. Cessna 172 with the registration Charlie Sierra Papa Mike Romeo. We'll be doing that particular route. We expect to have 4 hours 30 of flight, 6 hours 30 of fuel on board, and then there will be the pilot in command is myself, Pedro Raposo, and we'll take it from there. So with the flight plan already introduced, in this simulated flight, we are actually logged on to VATSIM, which is one of the networks that flies online. If there was a controller, we'll be talking to them. Because there isn't one at the moment, we'll just listen on the Unicom frequency just in case there's something going on. And finally, on threat and error management, there is a model that looks after the general flight, human factors, departure conditions on route, and destination. As you would expect, the level of threat is high on this case. It's not extreme, it's high, so you have to be a serious alternative. Consult with other pilots if you can, if you want to. It's always good to talk to the pilots on how they would do it. And so we know we are on a high risk flight, so we should act accordingly. And a guidance from Pulleys themselves, which is a very nice flight, is about: do you have the right documents? Have you planned correctly? Is your machine on top shape? And then, above all, we'll be trying to follow that as well. Aviate, navigate, communicate. It's going to be very busy. I'm going to be flying the plane. I'm going to be talking about a lot of stuff. I'm going to be showing pictures. I'm going to be doing a bit of DJing. So this might seem a bit crazy. Obviously, you can only do this on simulated flight, but it's going to work out. Okay. So that was our pre-flight briefing. Again, on the resources that the pilots have today, there's a lot of things you can use. SkyDemon is one of them. We'll be using SkyDemon. We've used SkyDemon to plan our flight. As you can see here, we're planned to go 10,000 feet with an economic cruise, 55% of power. And this is the kind of the plan we're going to be following. I will be logging on to explain, so it records what we're doing throughout the flight, so that should work. On to leg number 1. This is where the fun starts. Okay, so we've done our pre-flight briefing, check, and we've got our flight plan filed, we've got our flight log, we've got everything correct. So now the next thing is, let's jump on the plane and let's start doing our thing. So the first thing you would do is you would have your checklist with you. I'm going to be using the pre-flight inspection checklist I have from my flight school. So the first thing we would do is, even before we got to the plane, we would see essential aircraft documents, like insurance, a radio license, and all of that. And then we would look at any defect sheets or the tech log, see if everything's fine, if any pilots had any issues with the previous flight or anything broken or inoperative. Obviously here we don't have that situation. And then you would look at NOTAMs, weather, mass and balance, performance, which we've done all of that just now. And then we would go to the plane and start preparing for the flight. Okay, so as we are now here on the plane, let's just go and show you what we're flying today. So today we're going to be flying the Cessna 172. This aircraft is, I don't know where that car came from, but anyway, that's interesting. So this is a customized aircraft, the Papa Mike Romeo. You can see over there the logo on the vertical tail. And no flight is going to be complete without having something interesting on the fuselage. So there's my children's name and my wife's name. That's just going to be, this is not exactly the spirit of St. Louis, but it's cool to do these kind of things. And as we walk to the plane, then what we would do is we would get in the cockpit. And as we get in the cockpit, we would remove the control lock. We would check that the fuel selector is on both, parking brake is set, fire extinguisher, first aid kit, all that stuff is supposed to be there. And we would then release all the covers and all the stuff from all the chocks and the pitot cover and all the tie downs and all that stuff. Okay. Now, as we've prepared the aircraft for flight, then we would go and do we put on the battery, and as we have the battery, you get some power, and you could see you would see the fuel Now in this case we're flying the Cessna 172 with the Garmin 1000 or close to Garmin 1000. We could just check out what the fuel is. I've already fueled up the aircraft, so that's good. And we would then put full flaps down to check flaps, and we could see the flaps are there, flaps are down. And then we would turn on the beacon, the nav light, to see if they're all, we put all the lights, and we would do an external walk around to see if all the lights are working. We got the beacon, we got the strobes, we got the nav lights, we got the landing lights. All lights seem to be working okay, so that's good. We're just gonna switch those off except the beacon, which we don't really need. And then we would turn the battery off so we don't drain the battery. And then we would do our walk around on the aircraft. Now I'm just going to tell you what we would normally do without too much delay. We would check the flaps for any gaps or anything broken. We would look at the ailerons, we would move them a little bit just to see that they're anti-symmetrical and that they're moving together. We'd look at the wingtip and lights, the lower surface. We'd suck a little bit on the stall warner just to see that it's working properly. And then we would go on the top of the aircraft and check the fuel with a fuel gauge, or just by putting your finger in there and watching visually. So we look at all the different things. We look at the landing gear. We would look at whether it's if the wheels are inflated, if there's any tire grooves, door hinges, and then we would go to the nose section. Look at the windscreen, the static port, just over here on the left-hand side by the names. Propeller and spinner, any cracks, anything that is not supposed to be there. We'd be looking at the air intake down there and the filter, the nose, landing gear, the exhaust pipe. Apparently everything is in good shape, so we would then continue to go around. It's really annoying, this truck from X-Plane coming around. That's a good thing about the live video, isn't it? And then we would be doing the same thing about the video, the ailerons on the other side, and looking at the flaps. And then we would look at the skin, the aerials, if all the antennas are in its proper place. And that's pretty much it. You know, you would look at all the surfaces, and you would make sure that everything is moving and there's no bolts out of place. So once we finish the external check, we would then go to the passenger briefing. So there's this, we're just gonna skip that bit. We would just get settled in, put our seats and harnesses, and then we would do a check on controls and see if they're moving okay. We would look out the window and see we can see that the ailerons are working, and we would look back and we just go and see that everything is okay. So we've checked the ailerons, rudder, elevator, the trim. Let's have a look at the trim. The trim's down here, so we see it's neutral, so that looks okay. And then after that we just go and see that the fuel selector is on both and all the circuit breakers are in, and then we would put on the beacon, and we would put the navigations if it was at night, but we're not going to do that just yet. Okay, so we've done all of that, and what we're going to do next is we're going to start the aircraft. So the first thing you would do is you would exercise the mixture to rich. You would open the throttle a little bit, just a little bit. Put the battery on. We're not going to be doing the primer and the carb heat on this aircraft. And then what you do is, once you've got mixture, throttle, carb heat, primer, and we would look around for the propeller area being clear. We would just usually scream out a little bit to say it's clear, and then we would go and start the engine. So feet on the brakes, and we would go and the engine's running. Cut back a little bit. Magnetos on both, and we put on the alternator so that we don't drain the battery. And now we have ignition. First thing we would do is to look for oil pressure, that the oil is flowing and we don't have anything wrong with the engine, and oil temperature. Okay, and brakes are on, and then after that we would switch on all the electrics. We're going to switch on the avionics master. We'd put on the nav lights. We're going to need that, and we're going to put the flaps up. Okay, so it seems we are rolling now, and we would then put on the electrical equipment, flaps up. We get the 80s. We don't have any active 80s here, but we know what the weather is like. We're going to go and have a look again in Windy, and what Windy is showing us is, let's refresh that. Wind is showing in Santa Maria that the wind is 7 knots from the south, visibility is okay, a few clouds, and the QNH 10 to 8. So we're going to go and set that in our, into our altimeter, 1028. We forget that, so we've got the airfield altitude there. Another thing which I already did is I've already put in the flight plan in the GPS, although we'll be double checking with the usual radio nav aids. So that's already sorted. Okay, so before we do taxi checks, well, a couple of things we should have done, but we're going to do it now. Is we're going to be putting Sky Demon working for us. So we're going to go and say go fly. That'll connect to explain. We're going to log engine start, so he knows we're there. And engine start is logged at 12:30 Zulu time. So we've got that working. So we're in the plane, engine's running. So we've got the time set. Now, next we would now normally request from ATC clearance to start up, which we already did, and then we would request taxi. We don't have ATC online, so we're just going to put our transponder on 7000, which is actually it's going to be 2000, which is the, if you're flying IFR, we're going to put that in the box, and we're going to take it from there. Okay, so we're ready to go. Just to give you an idea, after takeoff, we're going to be putting the autopilot, and we're going to be starting the fun part of this flight. Okay, so let's see if we got everything right. So another thing we're going to be using is we're got Navigraph. It's going to be working for us. So Navigraph, this is the standard instrument departure. And in terms of taxi, we're going to be we're somewhere here in the general aviation parking, so we're going to go on Delta and then Echo. We don't really need to go to the end of the runway because we don't need the full runway length, but that should be fine. We're going to go on Delta and then Echo. So let's do that. And then when we get there to the holding point, we would do our power check. So typically you would say Charlie Sierra Papa Mike Romeo on general aviation apron, request taxi, and they would say something like, yeah, taxi to holding point, echo, and hold short. So we would do that. So let's get going, boys. Brakes off. Bit of power. So as I said, we're going to go on Delta. Oops. One of the fun things about going live is this. Right, so we're going to go on Delta. Taxi, they say at the speed of a person on a fast pace, so you don't go crazy with taxi speed. Besides, there's no rush, so we were off block time 12:32. We'll take a note of that. Other things to consider as you're going down the taxiways, your emergency briefings from memory, you would typically talk about engine failure during takeoff run. What would you do? Well, throttle back, apply brakes, mixture off, ignition off, master switch off in case of a runway excursion. Let's go here on Echo. Thing you can do with Navigraph is you can see where you are in real time. If you switch on this, you'll know that you are on Echo, which is great. So we know we're in the right place. So typical emergency briefings would be engine failure immediately after takeoff run. You would then best glide speed 60 knots, mixture idle cut off, you would cut off all fuel, ignition switch off, wing flaps as required, and then master switch off after you communicate that you have an emergency. And if you would do this, if you would have an engine failure after takeoff with no remaining available runway, then you would find a suitable place to land, pitch bank no more than 10 degrees, and then you would go and full flaps, ignition off, master switch off after communications. This is the kind of thing you would do. Immediately pitch down and find a place to land safely. Okay, you would normally be singing this as you go along. Okay, let's hold here. Let's do a bit of paperwork. So let's go here and pilot log. So brakes off, 12:32, and we'll be taking off in a couple of minutes. So it doesn't need to be perfect. So we're going to do that. 38, and let's go here on leg 1. So I think we're pretty much ready to go. One thing we haven't done yet is our power checks. Normally the power checks you do is you put magnetos both, carburetor off, you put your flaps set for takeoff, and you give it the beans basically. You put some 1800, and then you would switch magnetos, left drops, both covers, right drops, left maintains, and both recovers. We do carb E to see if it drops about 100 RPM on an earlier version of the Cessna 172, and then you cut power, and then if you're happy that the engine is running smoothly and everything is fine, then you would go and be ready to fly. So pre-takeoff check, primer locked, magnetos on both, carburetor heat is off, throttle friction is set. We're going to be doing a flapless takeoff since it's a very long runway. We don't need to add that drag to our aircraft. The trim is on neutral, fuel selector is on both. Seat belts are on. Flight controls, let's just do another check that flights are free, doors are closed, and I think we're ATC would then say, okay, Charlie Sierra Papa Mike Romeo, winds 1807 knots, clear for takeoff, runway 18, it's clear for takeoff 18, and we then get going. So let's do that. Let's just line up on the runway. I hope you're enjoying this, because I really am enjoying it, and the best is yet to come. So stick around.
Entered runway 18.
And Sky Demon is already helping us, saying entering runway 18. So let's line up here. Let's have a look what Sky Demon is showing us. Sky Demon is telling us we're there, which is good. It's already counting the block time and the engine time, which is fantastic. Let's go back to where we were. Leg 1. Okay, so feet on the brakes, full power, and off we go. Bit of right rudder to counteract the prop. Airspeed is alive, and as we hit about 60 knots, we're going to gently pull the nose, and we'll just let the plane fly. Pitch up to about 10 degrees to try and get that VY of 73, 74, just a little bit, about 10 degrees. That's good. Trim the aircraft.
Controlled airspace 500 feet above.
About 1,000 feet, we're going to start right turn to 080. You can hear my instrument rating instructor saying fly the heading, so there you go. And pretty soon we're going to be on instruments, and 008. Need for too much backing at this stage. That pitch, so I can get a good climb speed. Pitch controls airspeed, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to be climbing to flight level 100, and transition altitude around here is 4,000 feet. So when I get to 4,000 feet, we're going to switch to standard pressure altimeter, which should be how easy it is to talk and get distracted. We already overshot our 008. So here we go, getting there, and then at 4,000 we're going to go to 1,013. I'm going to hand fly it for now. So let's give ourselves autopilot altitude. I'm going to get the autopilot to follow the nav. So there you go, the flight director is going to start taking us to the right and adjusting to that climb rate. I'm just going to be monitoring it. Okay, so we're airborne and things seem to be looking good. Next thing is I'm going to show you where we just left. So the point of this exercise is not just to fly the route, but just to tell you about the Azores. Okay. So for those that don't know, the Azores are a 9-island volcanic archipelago in the North Atlantic Ocean. It's 1,500 kilometers west of Lisbon, 1,900 kilometers southeast of Newfoundland. They're all anything from a few square kilometers to one of the biggest ones, which is Sta Maria Sao Miguel, which was trekking to. And originally they were discovered in the 15th century by Gonçalves Cabral, which was a captain at service of the Fonte de Henrique. There's still some disagreement about that, but basically it's been here since the 15th century. It's got a long tradition and history and a lot of things. The flights about flying is not exactly to be a master of history, but there's so much interesting stuff to tell you. I'm going to just start by telling you where we took off. So we just took off from Santa Maria, and Santa Maria is this island we just departed. Santa Maria is the first island that was that had people living here. It's part of the eastern group of islands, together with Sta Maria, and it's got about 5,500 people living there as of 2011. Let's have a look at some of the Santa Maria photos while we are climbing and monitoring what we're doing. Remember, aviate, navigate, communicate. I'm doing a lot of communicating here with you guys, but this needs to be a bit of navigating. Okay, let's do that. Let's the sim noise. I'm gonna put less sim noise. We're gonna put the microphone a bit higher. I hope this sorts out the hope this works. So one thing about Santa Maria and the rest of the islands, it's the incredible beauty and the little treasures they all are. For me, there are 9 hidden treasures, and this is the reason why I wanted to be doing this flight. You will see that every island has its unique landscapes, its unique history, and the origin of the flight.
Controlled airspace 1,700 feet above.
So somebody's telling me that there's a problem with the volume over the sound of the sim. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the sim sound a little bit and just increase my mic. Okay, I hope that works a little bit better. We've broken the clouds, and we're gonna go to 1013 as the transition altitude is 4,000 feet. So you can see immediately that drop in altitude, and right now we have a tailwind of 12 knots, which is good. So while we do that, next thing what we're going to do is, let's not forget our pilot log. And our pilot log, then we took off at 12:39. And we expect this leg to be 52 minutes, no, 30 minutes. So we would expect to arrive at our waypoint at 13:09, and then we're going to see at what time we actually get there. Okay, it's part of the game. Let's go back here to the sim. As we are climbing to our cruise altitude of 10,000 feet, we've just departed Santa Maria. Hope you are enjoying some of the pictures that I'm showing. And Santa Maria has a lot of things to talk about. The one that is very interesting is that Concorde used to do technical stops in Santa Maria. So I think everybody, the Concorde needs no introductions. The Concorde is or was the only supersonic airliner in the world. Both Air France and British Airways used to stop by in Santa Maria. In fact, it's been said that it was part of a very important part of the local economy, because a lot of obviously rich tourists would stop by and buy gifts and handicraft and stuff like that. And then the Concorde stopped stopping by, and but it's a shame. So right now it's interesting to see those old pictures of the Concorde stopping in Santa Maria. Santa Maria is still a very interesting part of the aviation world, not just because the Concorde used to stop by, but also because it holds the Oceanic Flight Information Region, or FIR, of Santa Maria, Oceanic Control. If you would look at the amount of airspace that is covered by Santa Maria, you would see that it's just huge. You know, it's about half of the North Atlantic Ocean down from Shanwick and Gander, and the other part the Americans control from New York. Now everything that goes over the North Atlantic probably talks to Santa Maria, and the other thing is Santa Maria also is controlling an airspace which is equivalent to about 50 times the size of Portugal, and this is an interesting thing. Santa Maria Oceanic FIR, everybody knows about that, and another thing that is interesting from Santa Maria is it's been there for such a long time. In fact, I hope you're starting to see some pictures now. Christopher Columbus, he stopped by on his way back from his first trip to discovering the Americas. And when he was returning, they encountered a very rough storm on the night of February 13th. And they all vowed that if they were spared, they will make a pilgrimage to the nearest Church of Our Lady. So they ended up in the Azores, actually. And there was a lot of things going on there. They didn't want to go on shore, but eventually did. And on the night of the 17th of February, the Niña laid anchor at Santa Maria. The cable broke, and Columbus had to stay offshore until the next morning. I'm just reading some notes from Wikipedia about this, just in case you're curious about this. To cut a long story short, a few sailors took a boat to the island. They were then captured, and they sent some crew members to fulfill their vow, but the rest of the crew stayed in the Nina. And there was a verbal battle between Columbus and João de Castanheira, which was the island captain. And after 2 days, Castanheira released the prisoners, and having and they got confessions from them what they were doing on that part of the ocean. And they also claimed that Columbus was captured, but this was never backed up by Columbus' logbook. So Columbus was stopping in Santa Maria on February the 23rd on his way back. I think it's on the year of 1493. 1493, it's when Columbus stopped by, a very illustrious visit to one of the first inhabited islands. Another thing, and this goes to some of the memories I had when I was a child. I wasn't a child. I was already 14 years old. Was when a Boeing 707 crashed in Santa Maria. This was quite sad news. This was on the 8th of February 1989. Independent Air Flight 1851. Which is a Boeing 707 on a charter from Bergamo to Punta Cana. They were going to stop by at Santa Maria, and to cut a long story short, they crashed into Peak Walt, which is one of the higher points in Santa Maria Island, and with the loss of all 144 people on board. The deadliest plane crash in Portugal's history. It's also known as Disastro delle Azzorre, the disaster of the Azores by the Italians. And basically, what happened was, and I'm going to go through the conclusions of what happened. So they concluded basically the accident was the non-observance of the crew. They went below the minimum safety altitude, which was 3,000 feet. It was published. They went 2,000 feet. The controller also gave them the wrong QNH, which put them even lower. And to complicate things, then what happened was they then turned they did a turn into the island and just basically crashed into the island. So factors contributing were bad communication techniques by the co-pilot and the controller, non-standard phraseology. Now we all think we know what we're talking about on radio, but sometimes it's just not like that. They neglected the procedures, and basically it all went wrong. So the captain was a guy called Leon Dougherty, 41. There was the first officer, Sammy Adcock, 36, and flight engineer Jorge Gonzalez, 34. All these guys have 8,000 hours of flight, and basically the weather wasn't good, and they just crashed into the mountain. I remember I was 14 years old. I was traveling, and my mom called me and she said, this just happened, and basically it's an accident where it clearly shows the importance of sticking to the procedures and the standard phraseology. Now you're probably seeing on your screen some of the pictures of the aircraft and some of the remains of that crash, which was very sad indeed in those days. Okay, let's get back to the flying bit. We're passing 7,500 feet, flight level 750, and we're making progress to our first waypoint, which is in the northeast part of Sao Miguel. Let's just put that in a better. So we're 31 miles from getting there, another 20 minutes, and it's now 12:56 Zulu time. 20 minutes will be 12:16. We're basically with a 15 knots tailwind, which is good. I suppose when we turn west, it's going to get a bit more complicated, as we're going to get the wind from the southeast. southwest. Let's just do something here. It's a GPS fix. Right, before we jump on to the next section of history and interesting facts, let me just put a little something for you. We're going to start with one of my favorite Right, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that musical moment there with Pink Floyd and Learning to Fly, one of my favorite songs. We're now approaching our top of climb, 10,000 feet. And then we're going to start putting our fuel flow. We're going to lean the mixture a bit. In fact, we can start doing that just a little bit, just to get the fuel flow a little bit less. And once we get to 10,000 feet, we'll just throttle back a bit and lean the mixture. And we're on our way to the northeast of San Miguel, which is 20 miles away, 13 minutes to go. So we plan to be at 13:16. And if I go and have a look at my pilot log, I expect it to be at 13:09. Okay, so first one, we're 7 minutes behind. Let's see what happens once we start get going. Okay. So what else can I tell you about the Azores? Oh, well, I've already told you there are 9 islands, 9 volcanic islands. They are on the world's large tectonic plates, as you will see later on some information about that. Actually, one of the islands, Pico, is the highest point in Portugal with 2,351 meters. That's 7,713 feet for you that talk other different units. It's very temperate climate. You would have between 15 degrees Celsius and 25. Rainfall is significant, 700 to 1,600 annual millimeters. And we do get a lot of bad weather from the Atlantic. We've had, according to this source, a total of 11 hurricanes or tropical cyclones have affected. I personally lived a few there, so I know what that is like. Other interesting things, administration. There's 5 cities in the Azores, Ponta Delgada, which is one we'll be overflying. I don't think we'll be able to see it. There's Ponta Delgada and Ribeira Grande in São Miguel Island. You've got Angra do Heroísmo and Praia de Vitória, which is the leg number 2 we're going to do, and Horta, which is in Faial on the central group, which we'll be flying by also. Altogether, the Azores has about 250,000 people as per the census of 2011, and the economy is mainly agriculture, fisheries, tourism, basically cattle raising, all sorts of fruit, tobacco, tea. It's a crazy islands. They everything grows there basically, and they're all good. So you also have the fishing. If you like fishing, this is the place to go. Let's start getting a bit. Let's throttle back a bit, and let's leave it about 5 gallons per hour. Just on the flying side, before I go on talking about other things, this aircraft has 200 liter capacity. It's got a 6.5 hours more or less of endurance. We plan to fly it for just over 4 hours, which is the objective of the Dawn to Dusk challenge. So at this fuel flow, we should be fine. We'll be monitoring that closely anyway. Okay, so we are 14 miles from the northeastern part of San Miguel, which is there. That's the kind of flight we're doing. And let me introduce you to São Miguel then. So São Miguel is the biggest island in the archipelago. It's 750 square kilometers. It's about 60 kilometers wide by 15 kilometers tall. It's actually where I was born back in 1975. It's a place of incredible beauty. and it's a place where everybody should go and visit one day. It really is an unspoiled treasure that everybody should go and have a look. Now, like all the other islands, there's very interesting things about São Miguel that you could go and visit. The picture you're seeing right now is of Sete Cidades, the blue lake and the green lake. We'll be talking about later on when we overfly it. But there's also Furnas, which is on the eastern side of the island, which is basically it's not an active volcano, but it's got secondary activity where you can see sulfur and smoke coming out of the ground. And one of the famous things is the cooking under the ground, where you put a pot of food, vegetables, meat, and all that stuff, and you leave it there for 5, 6, 7 hours, and then with the slow heat, it just cooks the food. It's an amazing experience. I highly recommend it. So we're gonna go in that direction now. I'm gonna show you a little bit about Furnas. And Furnas is a place where you have the botanic garden and the pool. It's a place where you can go and find the most amazing variety of plants, and it's just unique, the amount of biodiversity you would find in that little corner. It also has the what do you call it, the brown water swimming pools, hot water. The water is brown because it's full of iron that comes from the ground, and it's hot water. So if you go there and swim, you're probably going to ruin your swimsuit, but it's really worth doing that. Furnas is on the, as I mentioned, on the eastern side of the island. It's a place where you can go and eat that, and there's also a lagoon there. You're not allowed to swim because it's a little bit dangerous, but you can go and tip your toes and see this activity going on. Now let's go and do something here before we lose track of the flight. Let's rejoin our route, as we were distracted in talking about these things, which is a good lesson about being aviate, navigate, communicate. Look around if we can see an island here. We can't really see much. Oh, hang on, you can see something. I'll just use an explain trick. Oh, there you go. There's São Miguel. But let's not use cheat mode as much as we are. Okay, so we're about to get to the first leg of the flight, or the first half of the first leg, if you want to call it like that, as the first leg is from Santa Maria to São Miguel, and we're going to be going on the northeastern side. So I'll let you enjoy some of the pictures of Furnas. Right now we are doing 128 knots of ground speed to an indicated airspeed of 90. So we got a very good tailwind, which I wasn't quite expecting, but this is going to turn into a crosswind. as soon as we turn to the west, and we're making good progress. So we're 3 miles out. Let's have a look what Sky Demon is tracking. So there you go. Sky Demon this is the deviation we did. Shame on me, I should be paying more attention. And then when we get there, we're gonna turn left. Okay. Back on the cockpit. So it's going to be turning left to heading 265 in a few seconds, so we can say we arrived at our waypoint at 13:14 Zulu time. There you go, marvelous, pilot. And let's have a look a little bit of the island. Okay, so a little bit of pilot admin. We're going to go on our pilot log and we're going to put we arrived at 13:14. So 4 minutes late, and we now have 18 minutes, so that makes it 13:32 to get to our next stop. Let's see what this boy is saying. Yeah, should be there in about 18 minutes, which is good. So we've got that noted down as the estimated time of arrival, and we're going to go back to the cockpit. So just last week was a very important festivity in São Miguel. The islands are very religious in nature for many reasons. But one of them was the Festas do Santo Cristo, and Santo Cristo is how should I describe it? It's such a local, rich cultural tradition, a Catholic tradition, where you have a procession and there's an image of the Christ, where people have been contributing and adoring it for maybe I think 400 years. It sits in a special church and it's got a special procession. Thousands and thousands of immigrants fly to São Miguel during this period to pay their respects and to pay for the promises they made if Santo Cristo would help. And there's an incredible tradition. I think it's probably the first one in about 300-400 years that Santo Cristo festivities are not as they used to be due to the COVID-19 situation. But it really is an incredible week in São Miguel from a religious perspective. Everybody that is devoted to Santo Cristo will vouch for that. And there's always festivities. You will see some pictures there of Campo São Francisco, which, by the way, is where I crashed my first time with the bike. Paulo, if you're listening, thanks for the help. And I'm sure you remember this episode. And it's just something worth researching. Now another interesting thing is the airport in Ponta Delgada is called John Paul II, John Paul II, and Pope John Paul II was until today the only pope that visited the Azores, and then in less than 24 hours he visited Terceira, and he kneeled in the image of Santo Cristo. He was there in May 1991, on the second visit to Portugal. In total, he did 3. Pope John Paul II also, he was born as Karol Wojtyła. He was elected Pope on the 16th of October 78. He was born in Wadowice, and he died in the Vatican on the 2nd of April 2005. He's a very loved person in Portugal, and actually the airport just ahead of us has his name, which is an interesting thing to know about. Right, time for another song. Let's listen to. How about we listen to some Sinatra? Well, thank you, Mr. Sinatra, for that very entertaining moment of come and fly with me, which is always a thought I have when I putting this together. Come fly with me. Thanks for flying with me. It's great to have you on board. And as we're heading to São Miguel, we're heading to Ponta Delgada in São Miguel. We're, let's see, about 10 minutes away. You can see our ground speed just dropped to 87 knots. Why is that, campers? Because we now have a headwind of 70 knots. So it's going to start slowing us down a little bit, as expected. So, and let's talk about the island of São Miguel, where I was born. Let's just switch that over. Oh, what can I say? Man, it's amazing beauty. I mean, all islands have incredible beauty, but São Miguel obviously is the one that gives me the smile on my face. the this is a Lagoa do Fogo picture with some mist. It's the you just need to go there and have a look. I'm speechless. I wish I could say more about how beautiful this is, but these really are 9 hidden treasures. That's why I'm doing this flight. Nobody would imagine that, or a lot of people don't even suspect the kind of beauty, diversity, richness, and the amazing things you would find in the Azores. I'm not even going to talk about some of the things like big game fishing and sailing and stuff like that. We'll see some of that later on. This is, by the way, a Furnas Lagoon, which we talked about, the picture you're now watching, and that's Lagoa de Cidades, which I will say a little bit about that in a few minutes when we get to Ponta Delgada. I'll just let you enjoy some of the pictures while I do some work here in the cockpit. One of the interesting things about the Azores weather, which we've lived through it, is the variability of the weather. We usually say you can have summer in the morning and winter in the afternoon. You can have the sun and then it's raining. It's really pouring down in the afternoon, which is one of the challenges of flying in this particular region. The weather can be it's obviously very influenced by the high pressure and the anticyclone that is from the Azores. Everybody knows the Azores high pressure, which then in turn influences the weather in the rest of Europe. So I was just having a look at the weather update in Flores, which is the proxy to Corvo. It's now looking at visibility still 1200 meters, light rain and drizzle, clouds few 100, broken 200, and that's not looking good at all. We'll see, give it another hour or so and see how that's working out. In the meantime, we're 5 minutes away from Ponta Delgada, and that is the updated version of that. So you can see Ponta Delgada is here in this plain between 3 volcanoes or 3 high points. It has a runway 30112, just in case we're thinking about stopping by. And over here on the western side, you can see that Sta Cidades. We'll be talking about that as we fly over that. I'm not too sure the weather's going to allow us to have a look at that. But you have here on the right-hand side Furnas and Lagoa de Fogo, which is where we are overflying now. So we're 5 minutes away from Ponta Delgada, which puts us there at 13:31 Zulu time, and according to the estimated time, which is 13:32. So yeah, we're going to be there, spot on, and then we're going to go towards the north west to Terceira, which has a lot of interesting stuff as well to see. We're still tracking on our GPS, and we'll be watching the weather and how we're doing in terms of time. Right, so you probably weren't expecting this, but here's a little bit of advertisement for myself. The 9 hidden treasures. I hope to make this flight a reality one day, the real flight. And I hope you are able at some point in time to either support the flight, donate, or sponsor, whatever you want to do. You have my email down there. Feel free to ping me or to let me know what you thought about this. Obviously, it's a bit amateurish. It's the first time I do this, but that's fine. Trying to fly, put videos and show pictures and talk about history and culture all at the same time. I will be doing this with a proper co-pilot, and we'll be doing some really nice, interesting pictures and doing a photo album from the sky, weather allowing, of course. So please sponsor the flight or let me know how I did today. Drop me an email, okay?